It's alleged that he has connections to the Nick Fuentes sphere of influence, and in fact, that side of that conservative realm has been angry at Charlie for gatekeeping the platform, right? So it seems that this is a case of kind of like a lion, right? You want a new territory, you have to battle a different lion in order to gain control of that territory. And in fact, they found their patriotic glory and solution in ensuring that there was an absence in this sphere, right, which creates a political vacuum. Who's going to create that influence within this conservative sphere? And now it's going to be that which couldn't initially before because Charlie was taking all of the attention, right? So this seems to be a battle between the conservative ideologies. It seems that the Nick Fuentes ideology, which is what influenced him, again, that's not saying that Nick Fuentes had anything to do with it or is connected to it, but that rhetoric, which can be positioned through his interests and dedications, tells us that that was a significant influence in choosing how to resolve that barrier that they had and having a complete influence over the conservative influence sphere, right? So now they basically solve their problem because who has the weight to take his space but the other side? But that's kind of weird because apparently there's a rumor that they position Kirk to be much less conservative than they would want him to, so he's not extreme enough. When I've been seeing some rhetoric of Nick Fuentes where I question, is he waking up to it? Obviously, he's not. But ultimately, that's interesting. And what determines the distinguishing between that side, which is Charlie, and the other side, which is the Nick realm, is that the Charlie one is much more pro, DT, and the Nick one is much critical of DT, right? So we see the battle and clash of the two conservative ideologies fighting for absolute influence of the spear. And I would also push back on the fact that this, even knowing this, and if it true, it would be political violence because he's not in elected office and they're not seeking for elected office representation, right? Within that result of the action. It is much more taking over the political sphere of influence and content creation and podcasting or whatever, entertainment. So this is interesting because it's a change of traditional shifts, which is not abnormal because this happens where, like, in other locations where if you take one certain influence, then you're capable of taking over that territory and influencing, right? I believe that was the intention here, but obviously this is all hearsay, this is all allegedly, but it seems like it is the battle of the incels. It's interesting because obviously, as I told all of you, it's not in the best interest for the left to do this to Charlie because ultimately there's going to be other Charlies, right? It's not actually a sustainable impact that will be left if he wasn't here. So I've always been indifferent to him. He's just someone who doesn't contribute anything positive, but I wouldn't wish anything bad on him. But ultimately, it wouldn't benefit us for him to be the one that someone would risk their liberty for, right? But if you want to remove the barrier that stops your conservative ideology from being the mainstream default conservative ideology, then maybe you would. And I believe that's what happened. And in a way, it's kind of like non state actors because it seems like two groups, right? But it's going to be interesting because this is battle of the conservatives. And I did not foresee this, although history tells us that it does happen.